Okay, thanks for being here today. I'm Adam Eben from the 30th Senate District I live in Alexandria, and I'm a co-chair of the Progressive Caucus. This is our third legislative session, and considering the events that have been going on in Richmond, we think it's more important than ever that progressive voice be heard loud and clear through the halls of this General Assembly in both chambers. And we have not only things that we are fighting, but we have things that we're proud to put forward, and there's a list of legislation in the packet. But we want our values to take even deeper root in the General Assembly, and we think Virginia's history is a history that embraces the movement that we bring forward. Now, I'm going to just briefly mention some of our policy goals, and what we're hoping to do is Delegate Hope's going to talk in detail about a few. I'll mention a few, but we're hoping that we can answer any questions that you might have. Among our goals is to welcome new Americans to the community, and rather than just be reacting to negative legislation, this year several members of our caucus, myself included, have put forth legislation that would provide in-state college tuition to those with the deferred action status granted by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. These are immigrants to Virginia who we want to see become a productive part of our workforce, and that we've invested money in their education. We believe that they will help further Governor McDonald's goal of bringing forth 100,000 new college degrees. And I just want to emphasize that they are folks who have a legal status granted by the U.S. government, and that according to our legislation, the kids will have lived in Virginia for 3 years, graduated from a Virginia high school, or gotten a GED in Virginia. We also are very much concerned with expanding access to democracy, and we not only have legislation that we have opposed to deal with voting rights, limiting them, but we've put forward legislation to expand voting rights and make it easier to vote and have a smoother election process. We're terribly concerned over the incredibly long lines and the inefficiency that many Virginians had to go through at the polls last November. We, of course, want to protect and preserve our natural resources, and that includes defending Virginia's very successful land preservation credits, and making sure that we don't take vast environmental risks with the prospect of mining uranium here in Virginia. We support fair and civil criminal justice and investing in Virginia's infrastructure. We must make sure that our roads are safe from falling apart, and that we promote Virginia jobs by investing in the infrastructure that is good and makes sense for Virginia in any regard. Now, there's a list of members of the Progressive Caucus in your packet as well. I want to make sure to introduce Senator Barbara Favola of Arlington. In addition to serving in the Virginia Senate, she also is the co-chair of the Reproductive Health Caucus. Women's Reproductive Health Caucus, and they both support men's reproductive health as well.
We actually support everybody's right to privacy and to make those important decisions.
Yeah, and also we have support for gun safety legislation, particularly after the tragedy in Newtown. Delegate Hope and I have both introduced a package of legislation for gun safety. We're disappointed that some of the most important parts were defeated, but we're really happy that Senator Marsh's bill to close the gun show loophole remains technically alive after passing and then being reconsidered in committee. We're hopeful that the committee, that we could take it at its word, and that they will actually work on the wording rather than find a way to kill it. And then lastly, I'll just mention two of the bills that are listed in your packet on the very last page have actually moved. One of them is fully funding and protecting the Virginia retirement system. The bill's not noted SJ 319, but this is a constitutional amendment, require that we make the adequate contributions each year to the fund, and that it would be actuarially sound, and that we won't have any disastrous consequences like California did that would hurt our workers. That's passed a subcommittee in P&E. And lastly, really notably for members of the Progressive Caucus, Senator McEachin and my SB 701 to have non-discrimination written into the code for state government has passed the General Laws Committee on an 8-7 vote and moves to the floor of the Senate, where I expect it will pass this year. And then hopefully then at that point it would move on to the House. I did want to just touch on what's happened in the Senate in recent days. We've seen a horrible abuse of power and a violation of the public trust and a violation of the Virginia Constitution in Republican attempts to redistrict the General Assembly with no notice and slapping a 40-page or so bill on our desks without public hearing, without public comment, without availability on a website, without notice to the members so it could be fully analyzed, and doing it on a day that we have a civil rights icon attending the inaugural of the president. And I'm usually very trusting, but I'm extremely disappointed that this happened to be a bill that was passed by through the day over and over, and then only on one of the news days that would be sure to be overshadowed in news across the state about the president's inaugural did it suddenly come forward with the substitute that I suspect was prepared in advance for just this opportunity. So with that, I'll introduce the co-chair and the founder of the Progressive Caucus from Arlington, Delegate Patrick Hope.
Thank you, Senator Evans. For once, the excitement's in the Senate, not the House. But I want to welcome you all to this morning's press conference. The Progressive Caucus, I'm Delegate Patrick Hope. I represent Arlington County, the 47th District. The Progressive Caucus and our members are interested in solving Virginia's problems. If you take a look at Virginia, we rank 48th in funding for transportation. We rank very low in funding for education. In fact, we're down to 2008 funding levels per pupil. We rank 48th in Medicaid funding, and yet we're an extremely wealthy state. We're certainly in the top 10 in per capita income, yet we have this disgraceful situation where we really take advantage of the poor, and we make it very hard for people to get ahead. And the Progressive Caucus looks through a lot of legislation through that lens to see how we can help bring up our lower class and our middle class. And that's what we want to do to help build our economy. And I think that's the best way to not only build it for the 21st century, but sustain it as well. And so as such, we're very focused on protecting education. As I said, we ranked from 2008, we're at 2008 funding levels per pupil. And what that's meant for a lot of schools is they've had to lay off teachers. And that means class size has increased. And that's a direct line to the quality of education, people coming out of school ready for jobs of the 21st century. And at some point, that's going to really bite us. And we've got to be ready to put more funding in those areas to make sure our schools are adequately funded for our kids. The other thing is, of course, promoting healthy families. Virginia needs to fully implement the Affordable Care Act. This is not a negotiable piece. We have over 300,000 Virginians, very low income, our poorest, they're probably the sickest out there, that need health insurance. And that they have an opportunity to get health insurance through the expansion of the Affordable Care Act, through Medicaid. Virginia needs to do it. The federal government's going to pay 100%. It's a good deal at 100%. It will go down to 90% over the next 10 years. You know, we currently, Medicaid pays, the federal government pays 50% match. That's a good deal at 50%. At 90%, it's even better. We don't walk away from these dollars when it comes to taking care of our most vulnerable populations. And so the Progressive Caucus stands firmly behind fully implementing the Affordable Care Act as well. And I'll just mention one thing. You know, yesterday marked the 40th anniversary of Roe versus Wade. And there's been polls that have been released that show an overwhelming majority of Americans support making sure keeping abortion safe and legal. And yet we had speeches on the floor of the House We heard one on the Senate as well, comparing abortion to the Holocaust. It's just shameful and repugnant. The Virginia Republicans brought us last session and certainly schooled me and everyone else of what a transvaginal ultrasound was. Gave us national attention that we did not want, did not deserve, not good for business. They assault on women, defining when life begins, trying to restrict contraception. These are battles that were fought long ago, and Republicans need to get out of the 50s and come back to the 21st century. Because we do not need this kind of attention. Again, these comments that were made on the floor of the House and the Senate are shameful and repugnant. And so, with that, you have in your press packet a number of different items in which we show our positions on. We'd be happy to answer any questions that we have. The Progressive Caucus has chairs and co-chairs of different committees, and we can get you that information if you like on many of the committees that we've set up, and they can answer specific questions. We can try to answer your specific questions now about different positions and what we're going to do during the session. But thank you all for being here today.
This is the time of year when we all start hearing about school budget shortfalls. Here in Richmond City Schools, you're talking about $11 million deficit. Hanover County, $5 million. That's my viewing area. Discuss some of the reasons as to why you believe, I mean, I know you're pushing for more funding, why you believe, and what are some of the obstacles in preventing more funding from getting to schools?
Well, I mean, my perspective is there's a guy that was unelected. His name is Grover Norquist, and he has had a lot of the members on the Republican side sign a pledge saying that they're not going to propose any new taxes without any offsets. And so when you look at the funding level and the needs that we have across the board, and just take education, we're funding at 2008 levels. Unless you're willing to put more money into education, unless you're willing to put more money on the table, because if you're going to put more money in his world, in Grover Norquist's world, you take it away from Medicaid or you take it away from transportation. That's a false choice. We need to put more revenue on the table to make sure that those funding needs are met. And that's my perspective on why we can't get to solving transportation, to solving education, to expanding Medicaid. Those are the reasons why we're not able to solve those problems with Virginians.
Thank you, Patrick. I just want to add, I'm Senator Barbara Favola. I represent parts of Arlington, Fairfax, and Loudoun, so I have a pretty broad Senate district. What Patrick Hope just said, I think, reiterates the fact that the General Assembly really does need to pass a transportation package, because we are using general fund money to support our maintenance program, and by 2017, we won't have any state dollars available to match federal dollars that would be available for construction purposes. So we would lose our ability to leverage federal money. We absolutely have to do something. Politicians do a huge disservice when they go out and tell their constituents that they can have all the services they want and they don't have to pay for them. That simply is not a true statement. And we need to tell folks that if you want top-notch schools, you know what? You need to put money behind them, because you need small class sizes. You need well-trained teachers. You need after-school programs. That's just the reality of it. You can go out and look at best practices, and we should be striving to achieve best practices. We're in the lower third in our salaries, our average salary for teachers. When that has to change. We have school districts around the state where the graduation rates are not very high, and that has to change. So, I don't know how many alarms we need, but when you, as an elected official, I think about the future. I think about where our investments should be. I think about what kind of economy I want to create, and the economy of tomorrow needs folks who are better educated, needs folks who go on beyond high school, needs folks who really have all the skills that you and I have and then some. So, and that's the future. If you want high-paying jobs in your state, if you want an educated workforce, we've got to invest in K through 12. And I will say, we also have to invest more in higher ed. We are in the low 40s in terms of our per capita income in funding students who are attending public institutions of higher ed in our state. And again, that has to change. So, thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, thank you all for coming out. We have in your press packet more information about the caucus. Oh, you've got one more. Here.
Before we wrap up, would someone speak to the issue of uranium mining? I see that it's listed in the agenda as opposed by the Progressive Caucus.
Well, I mean, it's pretty simple. It's at what cost do we threaten our environment? At what cost do we experiment with risky propositions that Virginia's climate is safe enough for uranium tailings to be stored for just thousands of years? At what cost do we risk the water table in Southside Virginia and beyond, where well water is among the drinking water? And at what cost do we consider sacrificing our environment for some jobs for one landowner in all of Virginia who owns all of the uranium deposits that are being discussed?
I will just add, all of you know this is a very contentious issue, but it also cuts across parties and it cuts across regions. There is bipartisan support to keep the ban on uranium mining, and there's bipartisan support to remove it. So people are really evaluating this, I think, based on what Senator Evan mentioned earlier. What is the public health risk, and is it worth it? How many jobs are we actually talking about? And now, a new coalition has formed. It's a coalition of business leaders and local governments near Pennsylvania County and in Pennsylvania County. And they're arguing that tourism will be negatively affected if the ban on uranium is removed. So they're not accepting the premise that there's necessarily going to be this huge net gain of jobs. The irony is the largest net gain of jobs I've seen was only 300. And you know over time that those jobs are going to become automated. But the fact of the matter is that the radioactive results of our mining, or the stuff that's left after they actually take their uranium out of the mine, will always be underground. Now they say it's going to be in a very safe container and it's not going to leak. You cannot convince me that over time it would not leak. And the public health impacts are really significant. I mean, we're talking about serious cancers, women who would have fetal abnormalities if they were pregnant, all kinds of things, and you just don't correct for that. You can't correct the problem, and that's what it is. Nobody can quantify the risk. Every study has said there is some risk. Nobody can tell us how much, but everybody says if in fact a bad thing were to happen, it's a really big, bad deal.
Anything else?
I'm not pressed, it's okay.
That's all right.
Okay. I am having trouble understanding why anybody would be against Medicaid expansion. Why is the governor not for this? It's money coming in, 100% covered. Then it's 90%. Is there, am I missing something?
I like to be naive about these things, and I don't know either. Everything that the governor said and other Republicans have been anti-Affordable Care Act like it's kryptonite. And we sort of backed ourselves into a corner. And now we're at a point where it's the law of the land. The Supreme Court has upheld it. President Obama won re-election very convincingly running on this. And so we got to figure out a way to implement it. And so we're focused here to try to figure out a way to bring everyone together so that we can get the Republicans and the governor to yes. This is the right thing to do for a number of reasons, notwithstanding the 300,000 people that would benefit, notwithstanding the costs to hospitals and to free clinics and things like that, notwithstanding the fact that the federal government's going to pay for it, and notwithstanding the fact that we are already paying for people who become sick. And so for all those reasons, the jobs, that over 30,000 jobs that will be created, we think that we will expand Medicaid. So I'll just be naive and say, I don't know why they wouldn't want to do that. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all for,
Just want to, as we conclude, just want to introduce Delegate Alfonso Lopez from the 49th District and make sure that he's acknowledged for his leadership in our caucus as well.
Just one thing, I apologize, I was in Science and Technology Committee, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions afterwards about the work on the DREAM Act, work on the Deferred Action Plan, and work on the addressing high-capacity gun magazines. The legislation's coming before the Militia and Police Committee, I think this week or possibly next week. Thanks.
Just wanted to add one point on the Medicaid expansion. There is growing bipartisan support in the Senate. I did put in the budget amendment, at least on the Democratic side. We will have some Medicaid reform elements to any Medicaid expansion program that takes place. But I think what's moving people is the Commonwealth Institute recently did an analysis which shows that more money would be flowing into the state than the state would actually be paying over a 10-year period. So that's a pretty powerful analysis. And the other point which we remind people of quite frequently is if Virginia does not participate, our tax dollars are going to help every other state in the country participate. So we need to step up, and I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,